Hi, thanks for joining us today. This is Carl Druschel. I will be your host. Please note we cannot hear you as you are muted. If any questions, I would ask that you use the chat window during the presentation. The presentation will last about 30 minutes, and once complete, we will address any questions sent in during the presentation and have an open Q&A session afterward. Okay, let's get started. The theme of this webinar is using GSX Monitor and Analyzer to monitor your SharePoint environment. With that, let me introduce my colleague, Steve Bystrand, Senior Vice President, Global Sales and Business Development. Steve?
Everybody, welcome to our worldwide audience. And I guess I say this every time, but I just want to let you all know that we're not going to be able to cover the depth and breadth of everything here in the session. This is meant to be a taste, I guess, and an appetizer, if you will. And if you want the whole meal, it probably makes sense to contact myself or one of our sales or technical team to go into more detail if you see something that makes sense and you think might enhance your operation as we go through things. As Carl mentioned, we'll have questions at the end and pop that in the chat window, and Carl will let you know when we're going to go ahead and address those questions. So we'll talk about SharePoint a little bit and monitor it and why you might want to monitor it. Before we dive into that, let's just briefly talk about who in the world is GSX. If you don't know who we are already, we've been around since 1996. We have a worldwide presence, primarily in North America and Europe, but we have clients worldwide. And what we do is specialize in and reporting on various collaboration platforms, and obviously SharePoint is one of them. We've got a fairly range of customers, about 600 customers right now, 30%, a little over 30% of the Fortune 100. And then also a lot of managed service providers are our clients. So behind each one of those clients to us, there's 50 or 60 other clients. So it's a broadly used product. What we're here to talk about is how it can be used in SharePoint, obviously. So a couple quick introductory points, if you will, and then we'll jump into the tool itself so you can see what it looks and feels like. It's an agentless tool. So what it means is nothing has to be installed on your SharePoint servers if you want to monitor SharePoint. If you want to monitor Exchange 2010, you don't have to monitor or rather install any agents or code on your DAG server or your CAS servers. If you monitor Domino, you don't have to put anything on your Domino servers. It all really depends on what platforms you're using, but in each of those cases, there's no code set or agents installed on the servers. Another interesting thing that we do is simulate user activity. So some of the bullet points, I guess I'm jumping around a little bit, but again, obviously it's agentless. We already talked about a few different platforms, so it's multi-platform. Because it's agentless, nothing has to be installed on those servers, so it's a virtual plug-and-play installation to get going, and you can be up and running very quickly. It's not a multi-month consulting gig to get to the point where you can begin doing basic monitoring. You could virtually probably do that in a couple of hours at the most, and you're up and running. And the concept of simulating user activity means that it's not just are the resources up or down, but moreover we're going to get into how the user experiencing and consuming those resources, and is that acceptable? And that's more of a definition of what is up down to us than is just the hardware up or down, or is the SharePoint app up and down or down and running. So we're going to look at a lot more detail than that. We've talked about some of these real quickly, but it's again out of the box. You're going to be able to do multi-platform monitor specifically for SharePoint, your web services from the user perspective, under the usage of SharePoint, and measure the usage of that SharePoint from the user's perspective, and of course be able to report on that as well. Make sure your indexer is working. It's great that you have a lot of data in SharePoint, but it would be even better if we could find it once in a while. So obviously your indexer has to be working for that to work, or for that to be able to happen, and we'll show you how that works. We're going to show you some of the user-specific metrics like monitoring individual SharePoint sites. And when we say that, what we're trying to do not just confirm that it is accessible, but how long does it take for the user to access that, as well as other type scenarios that users do over and over again to be able to make sure that the user experience is acceptable to the business on the other end, to the users on the other end of that pipe. And obviously reporting and understanding what that experience is over time is very, very important to increase and continue continuously improve the service that you're providing to your end users. And of course, at the end, we'll have a Q&A. Let's jump into the tool right now. And sorry for the quick change on screens there. And GSX Monitor, and we refer to it as GSX Monitor, but it's really actually two tools. It's GSX Monitor and GSX Analyzer. The piece of functionality that is really technically GSX Monitor is the piece that we're looking at now that has a user interface primarily for the administration resources within the company, so they can get a real-time view of what's happening in their environment. It's the tool that does the probing. It's the piece of the solution that does the constant tests and then presents that to you as well, alerts you if something's not working properly. And then GSX Analyzer is the piece that gives that data so that you can understand what the user's experience is to provide management reports, etc. And again, we're going to go into both of these parts of the tool a little bit here today. I want to remind you again, we're never going to get through it all here in 30 minutes or so, and of course with the 15 minutes additional for Q&A. So I want to invite you to either download it and try it yourself, or maybe you want to do a one-on-one session with one of a worldwide group of account managers. So what we're looking at right now is the main view or the admin dashboard of GSX Monitor. And we thought this being multi-platform, but just let's chat about it for a couple moments here. Green lights are good, red lights are bad, and you can actually tune that color. But here we're looking at Exchange 2010 with a DAG and a CAS array, Exchange 2007. Here, of course, we're going to focus on SharePoint. And we'll come back to that. BlackBerry servers, including high availability clusters, IBM Domino, same time, Travelers, another active sync-based mobility platform. Here is some file sharing and similar functionality and concept to SharePoint, but only in the IBM world. And we can also monitor individual ports and individual pages and the underlying web servers. Now let's just corral things and get back into the specifics of SharePoint. So here, looking at each one of these bars is a server entry, and you can have as many servers as you want depending on your licensing level. And then of course these bars that we actually call them separators, you can have them say whatever you want. The whole idea is to drag and drop server entries under the titles that you've organized your screens in, so that everyone in your worldwide team or your one city in whatever country you're in team can understand exactly what servers we're talking about. So here we're talking about a SharePoint 2010 server, and the green line under the upward is telling me that the server is up, and that means that this is up, and the services that we've said we want to monitor on that server are up. And you'll probably notice here there's a tool tip. If I mouse over a server, you see exactly why it's the color it is. So is the server up, and is the services, or are the services that we've chosen to monitor up? Are we seeing errors in the log files in the log column? And then is the SQL database acceptable? We're going to go into the details to show you how that's configured, and also what constitutes up or down or red light, etc. So I'm going to double click on a server, and I've gone into the next tab over the server settings page, and I'm on the SharePoint Scanning page. When I actually add a new server, I would normally do that, and the wizard here that you see allows me to go through all the settings with the classic next, 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 finish concept, where I can set up all the functionality of GSX Monitor. And when you're adding a new server, you're certainly going to use that to make it quicker and make sure you do all settings that you need to, rather than going in, and as we're going to go directly into the settings in a moment. You also can create templates so that you can create flavors, if you will, of the way you want to deal with certain servers. And so these are different ways for us to try to make it easier for you to get the settings to be the way you want. So we're, again, SharePoint scanning settings, the basic settings, and we establish the credentials to connect to that server. How are we going to scan with WMI or with SNMP? We can establish, again, the credentials of the way we're going to connect to that server. And then here's where we determine what are the web services that on that particular SharePoint server we choose to monitor. So you can check off the ones that are appropriate to the function of that server and to support the end user community that's going to use it, and monitor them. You should never be monitoring something that you don't care about, because you certainly don't want to get an alert on something that doesn't matter to you. Alerting is one of those things that people, when they first start to use it, think that more better, and that's not always the case, because if you flood your administration resources with millions of alerts, they're going to almost immediately stop paying attention because it's the boy crying wolf situation where you're saying wolf so much that no one notices when it finally is a real alert. So you want to make sure you tune this, and there's a lot of functionality in GSX Monitor to help you tune appropriately. Is there a server? What are my SQL settings where I can establish the credentials to connect to my SQL database, and if I have a mirrored backend as well? So we're doing several things by connecting to the SQL database. We're obviously making sure that it's accessible, and we're gathering some of our statistics and statuses directly from SQL to make sure that we have that. We're going to continue on here and talk about indexer alerts. We mentioned this in the PowerPoint, and the concept of indexer alerts is that we're going to test not only that the indexer is working, but last successful crawl was, and you can establish a time threshold since the last successful crawl. I got the alert disabled here. That doesn't mean that the test is disabled. It means that we're not alerting someone if it isn't a successful crawl, which obviously doesn't make sense, but this is demo data. And this little button here allows me to establish a specific alert profile, and let's just go look at one, and we'll use the default one. Because we probably mentioned alerts early on. Here are all the different types of alerts I can send, and here is what we're actually doing for the default profile. So for the default profile, we're sending an alert to GSX Monitor at gsx.net. Well, if I also want to notify Steve Bystrom or admin distribution list X, I can add other people, so I can send email alerts. I can send SMS text, so if I want to send a page to Kara Birmingham, I'm also now doing that. If I want to launch another program and send a command line to it, I can do that. If I want to play a U-boat crash dive sound on the GSX Monitor installation in the server room in City, I can do that as well. It only makes sense. Someone's in that room, of course, so that's why we have these overlapping alert methodologies. So you can make sure that even if email's down, we can get notification out some other way. So I can send Windows pop messages. If you have the optional SNMP module, I can send an SNMP trap to Scom if I want to do that. And I also have the capability of if I have a GSM modem installed also on that server that's running GSX Monitor, I can get word out from that server room even if it's somehow cut off because our network is down. The idea here is that you have multiple possible alerting methodologies, and you can alert based on the way you want to. More things here. There's a scheduler, so you can have an on-call schedule. We can have the concept of reminders, which means if an alert occurs and it's not fixed in the next interval, we alert again to remind you. There's this concept of escalation, so that if, say, I'm the junior admin and we notify Steve, and I can't fix it in 10 minutes, maybe we want to notify Carl because he's the senior guy, and we want to make sure that we don't waste his time on the easy stuff, but when something's still down for an extended period, we want to notify him or whomever that something's up. So I'm not going to bother saving this, but the idea here is if we don't have a successful crawl, we're going to do something. We're going to notify someone. And then we also notice that virtually all of our alerts, we have a down and an up alert. So that means if we've notified 10 people that something is down, we're going to notify those same 10 people normally that the thing is up, so that the 9 people who didn't respond to it also are informed that services have been remediated. There's another threshold here that says the number of unsuccessful crawl elements. It is normal that there is a certain amount of content that cannot successfully be crawled, and you can establish a threshold that beneath that threshold it's okay, and above that threshold it's a concern. You can decide how sensitive you want to be by changing this value here, tuning this as appropriate, not just in your environment globally, but server by server, and then again issue the same kinds of concept of alerts up or down, that if we've violated a threshold, so nothing's actually down, but we labeled a down alert, but that means we've gone outside of the normal capacity. That's what the indexer alerts are. I guess I kind of should go into the basics. These first couple columns here work together. So the scan frequency means how often do I scan that server. So I'm scanning this server every 9 minutes, this one every 5, every 2. You can establish the sensitivity based on the function of that server and how often you want to check. Only 2 things can happen on my normal interval of whatever it is, 9 minutes or 2 minutes. I either can successfully connect and therefore I know that the services are available to users, or I cannot. So if I can successfully connect, GSX monitor goes away and comes back again, and the 9-minute interval or the 2-minute interval or the 5-minute or the 20-minute or whatever you've set, it does the same test all over again, 24/7, forever and ever and ever. So again, if it's successful, I just keep doing it again and again. If it's not successful, the next two columns govern what do I do. So the first one is telling me that I'm going to start retrying at a lesser interval. So instead of being, I think something's wrong, so I'm not going to wait 9 minutes to test it again. I'm going to start testing it at some lesser interval, and you can again test, or rather set that to be what you believe to be appropriate. The next column determines when do I send out those alerts we spoke about. So in this case, I have an alert threshold during business hours of 1 minute. So that means I'm not going to send an alert if on my normal 9-minute cycle or my normal 2-minute cycle I think something's wrong. I'm going to wait 1 minute before I send the alert. And of course, the only reason to wait is if I want to do some additional things like do some retry attempts. So you can tune your sensitivity up to the way that specific server behaves, the importance of those functions that are occurring on that server. The whole idea here is to increase or decrease your sensitivity and therefore your alerting, so that your admin resources know when GSX Monitor says something's happening, it really is happening. And then, of course, I can establish business hours on that server, and then during off hours, if you even have off hours, which you may not, I can be less sensitive in the middle of the night than I might be during the middle of the workday. That's obviously something you can tune. And then, of course, here I'm triggering the default alert profile or profile ABC or however you've chosen to name your alerting methodologies in your profiles. If SharePoint's down, if the network is inaccessible, if the SharePoint is back up, and if the network seems to be back. There's a whole lot of other alerts, and maybe I should just show you that very quickly. And here we have all the alerts for Domino. Here we have the alerts for our mail probes. Here we have the alerts for replication, for same time. Of course, we're not here to talk about that. For BlackBerry, all of these different conditions we can alert on. If specific databases are not working, if Exchange has certain alerting conditions or problem conditions, and then here we have all of our SharePoint stuff where SharePoint's down, network's down, SharePoint disk thresholds violated, SQL's up, down, SharePoint access time is suffering, the crawl stuff that we just talked about and the unsuccessful elements, and then we'll talk in a moment here about SharePoint scenarios and what those are. So all those different conditions can have their own alerting methodologies behind them. SharePoint log scanning, let's just do that very quickly before we get into scenario statistics. Here we have another way where you can establish what is the SharePoint log, what is the scan interval. So in this case, we're going to scan our SharePoint logs every 15 minutes. We're saying discard repetitions if I see the same thing multiple times. And in this case, process all documents not already scanned, which is a complicated way of saying only process the new stuff since my last scanned 15 minutes ago. And what I'm looking for is critical errors and non-critical errors. And I have two buckets of alerts, and I can action on them differently. That's why there's multiple buckets. So if I have a critical error, the word error, let's say we've decided that that's a critical error. If that shows up in my SharePoint logs, and you pick strings, it doesn't have to be a human-readable word. It could be X171B : /271. I don't know. I made this up. If that string of characters lands in the SharePoint logs, we're going to maybe send an alert, and you have the same alerting methodologies you had before. The concept here of a keyword to look for and then a keyword to exclude would be if I want to look for the word error, but I don't want to look for the word error 7. Okay, 7 doesn't matter, but the error, everything else does. So in this case, I'm going to get notified of all the times the word error shows up unless it's error 7, and then that's going to be ignored. So you can tune this to have the strings you're looking for, but press other strings that include the first string that are not an issue. It's the same the way this works down here. Non-critical errors. So this would be for things that happen fairly routinely. You do want to know about them, but you don't want to be told in the middle of the night, oh my God, wake up, the world is ending, because in this case it's really non-critical. So you can have either different methodologies, or you can even suppress alerting completely for non-critical errors and just have that dump into one of the reports that we'll show you in a couple of minutes. So the concept here is, again, to keep an eye on this data. Most administrators know that there's valuable data in the logs, but it's just too inaccessible and difficult to get to. So it's usually only looked at after some sort of a crash or downtime as an analysis tool for troubleshooting to see what was happening before something went down. If you find something that is a warning of something being down, wouldn't it be nice to have our GSX monitor look for that and notify you automatically of those situations? So that's basics. Let's jump into some of the other things. The scenario statistics or scenario tests, and I have various types depending on what platform we're talking about, but here we're here to talk about SharePoint. SharePoint is very user intensive, and there are many tasks and activities that users are constantly doing. So we're obviously monitoring the underlying resources and the response times, etc. But wouldn't it be nice to know if users are really having trouble uploading documents? Well, let's test that on an ongoing and consistent basis over time, so that we know if there's a problem before they mention it. So in this case, I have all of these different choices. And so we mentioned upload a document, so let's click on that one. I only have one probe set up in our demo data, but you might be having multiple probes where you're uploading documents on various servers and in various places within your environment. And in this case, we're testing this every 30 minutes. You can set that interval to be what you want. So GSX Monitor is going to attempt to upload a test document. You define what the document is, by the way. So if you want to make it a small or a large document, you want to make it a 5 megabyte document, you can do that, absolutely. And then GSX Monitor will repetitively attempt to upload that document. Then it deletes it, by the way, so you're not jamming more disk space requirements into your environment just for testing. So all this stuff is to set it up, but basically every 30 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever you want it to be, I'm uploading a document, and if it doesn't work, okay, I am alerting with the default profile in this example, but you can alert different people in different ways. And we're actually not just alerting if it does not work, if it does not work within a timeout threshold. So in this case, it's 10,000 milliseconds. You can set that to be whatever you want. And that should be indicative of the upper limit of what the user body could accept and still do their job before they're going to start being impacted in a negative way. So here, and we're not just saying, did it work? If it worked, if it didn't work, alert. We're saying, even if it works, but it exceeds this threshold, I'm going to invoke whatever alert we want. And then in addition, I also give you metrics, daily, weekly, monthly, so you have an understanding of what's normal and then what's happening today. Since we're here on the screen, just very quickly, we also have this concept in GSX Monitor of maintenance windows. So if you have cyclical and allowed downtime for good hygiene and maintenance, we obviously should not be alerting you that something's down when we all know it's down because it's down for maintenance, right? And then we also, in our metrics of availability, would suppress and remove the maintenance windows from our calculations. When we get into reporting, I'll show you that. So again, the concept here is we can set up multiple user-level tests. It's not a pretend test. It's a real test, just like any other user, because GSX Monitor is behaving just like another user in your environment. So creating a site, adding a blog post, creating a meeting, etc. I think you get the idea here. And this is something that we will be adding to additional probes as time goes on in our releases. If you are not a customer and you don't know anything about us, I'll tell you that we have a fairly fast tempo of pushing new functionality out to our customer base. And in fact, we have a new revision 10.2 that is supposed to be out sometime next month, mid to late April, based on our user acceptance testing. It's already we go. We just had one of these a couple months ago, so it's a fairly fast tempo of put functionality out to the customer body. Quick things, performance reports. Again, we're here to talk about SharePoint, but there's other types. SharePoint performance reports we're actually grabbing content. It's similar in concept to the scenario things, where we're grabbing data set essentially from a particular SharePoint site. You define what that is, and you can have multiple probes Again, have a frequency upon which we do this and an access time threshold. Same concept that if we violate that threshold, 180 seconds is a little long. I'm guessing your users would not accept a 3-minute waiting time, so this is just demo data. But the idea here, again, is to not only alert if something's not successful, but if it is successful but outside of normal function the users could, and the business can accept and still do their function. And here we're seeing that the actual experience that GSX Monitor did and experienced when it called for that data, I'm seeing the blue lines are days, so 5 or 6 days of data here. Depending on your scan cycle and some of the other settings, you can keep, I'm going to say a month of data at this scan level, and you can actually see, how come we have these crazy huge spikes every day in the middle of the afternoon? Wow, the users aren't crazy when they complain. There is a huge spike every day. Obviously my data doesn't show that. I'm just kind of using that example. Or a big plateau, or we're ramping up over time, and that server's acceptable performance is being violated, and maybe it's just time for some of that maintenance we talked about, and that Windows box needs to be rebooted so its performance recovers, and maybe we ought to do that automatically every month, perhaps. Well, now we've got the data to ask those questions of ourselves, and of course we can have multiple of these probes where we're looking at it. I'm going to just do one more quick thing on GSX Monitor, then I want to jump into the reporting side. So in the Statistics tab, we have a clearinghouse of all the statistics for a particular SharePoint server, all of my servers. So here we can see, and again, this is very useful for troubleshooting, what's my CPU utilization, total RAM utilization, etc., the number of sites, the number of docks, the successfully crawled elements, the last successful crawl, the total amount of storage, what web services there are there, and their latency and response time. I don't have any configured, but you'd see all that. Actually, in 10.2, there is a alert profile or alert method that if your web service's latency suffers beyond some number, again, you can set that you could invoke a alert. So nothing's down, but we're seeing that some of our services are not serving our user body adequately, and is that indicative of some performance issue on the server in general? What kind of content databases do we have, and some metrics on the storage, and then within each content database is the individual site collections and the same kind of data. So that's the sort of the near-term diagnostic troubleshooting data. And then let's jump into Analyzer. And we've only got a few minutes before the Q&A session is about to start. Carl, I'm going to go very fast here. Maybe if you can start thinking about some questions that folks have asked while we've been doing this. And if you haven't asked any questions, I would suggest that you do that now, so we can get to your questions as we go on. Okay, pushing GSX Monitor does all the data probing, or the probing, alerting, and data collection. And then we saw there is some very highly detailed data that we can review in the near-term time frame within GSX Monitor. At the every day, GSX Monitor automatically feeds data into GSX Analyzer, and then also some things are done on a real-time basis, like alerting. So we see a new dashboard. It's a website. It's another interface, if you will, and I like to refer to this as a manager's or executive dashboard. In this case, I'm looking at whichever server types I want. So I'm looking at SharePoint, and I see some key performance indicators, some KPIs in gauge format. I've configured what I want to see. I see a availability pie chart for the day. I see the 15 most recent days availability, and I see all of my individual SharePoint servers and all these performance detailed metrics, periodic statistics for the day. If I want to look at the week, I click on week. If I want monthly stats, I click on month. If I'm the owner of SharePoint and Exchange, okay, I can click on Exchange and look at the Exchange, my Exchange universe, and see the same kind of data. And of course, I've got different KPIs I wanted for Exchange. If I only own SharePoint, then based on my login credentials, it would only allow me to see SharePoint, and I couldn't navigate to Exchange. But maybe somebody else who has responsibility for both of those areas gets to do that navigation, or BES, or whatever it is that I'm responsible for, or maybe just BES in North America. So I only see these two servers because these two are in Paris, and the EMEA administrator sees those. All that profile is set up where I'm being presented with the data I want to look at the time I need to see it. And again, I can navigate to days, weeks, and months. That's what's on the Overview tab. I'm going to go very quickly about what's on these other tabs. Alerts shows me and gives me a way to mine my alerts. And I can look at alerts in a date range, a different type of alert, specific type of failure, or a specific resource to see what its history has been. So you might use that if you had a crash, you fixed it, and then you kind of remember, didn't that happen a couple months ago? You could actually go in and ask GSX Monitor to show you all the failures on that type of resource, or all the failures on that resource of this type. Okay, mine that data. I won't go into it, but if you want to see that, just let us know, and we'll set up a one-on-one session. Statistics allows me to mine this sort of periodic, detailed statistic data that on the first I'm only seeing for the most recent day, week, or month. But say I wanted to look at 5 days from 6 months ago. You could use the Statistics tab to mine that data for whatever reason. That event, on November 3rd, 4th, and 5th, you wanted to see that 3 days worth of data in detail. You could go pull that data out. Reports would be a tab where I can go look at, like we talked about, SharePoint log scanning. Let's say we had a non-critical list of errors that occurred that we don't even want to get an alert of any kind. We just want to get a daily report. Well, I could go look at that report there. I'm going to spend a few minutes on these last two. So, reports allows me to look at statistics over time. So here I have actually just 10 days or so, and I've selected certain statistics, and I'm charting them simultaneously over time, and then the ... is a forecast. You probably wouldn't forecast on daily data. It's meant more for long-term data. But the idea here, and let's just do one of these, I'll create a new one, but we also have templates where you can get a start point if you want to look at that. And here, looking at all of our statistics, so let's go to SharePoint. Here's all my SharePoint statistics. Here's all my SharePoint servers. So I get to pick what I want. Do I want all the stats, or do I just want, these 3 stats on all my servers, or just one of them? And then I can also I can create this report here in the interface where I can kind of pick it from this column over here on the left, or I can send it as a static report. So I'm going to send it as a static report. I can determine, of the stats I picked, which ones do I want in graphical format. Now I'm going to get 3 stats, but only 2 are going to be done graphically on all of my servers, or only the ones I select. I can say, I want to do this and deliver this report in German. I want it to be monthly, and I want it to be 20 months of data ending on February 5th for some reason, right? And they can say, I want to send this report to the management team, distribution list, or individuals as a PDF, attached PDF, and I wanted to do that once, the first day of every quarter. The PDF customization allows me to structure what it looks like. I can drop in logos and explanatory text and stuff, so that when that report is created and delivered, it's a finished product, and the CIO gets it, and she doesn't have to start asking questions, what in the world did you send me? It's all right there. And the forecast would allow me to say, I've taken 20 months of source data, and I want to forecast out 5 months into the future. So think about a really easy example to envision would be, we are growing. It's one of the big fears with SharePoint, that we're growing the data set so much and so quick that it's getting out of control. Well, we could look at historical SharePoint use to predict the future would be the concept. And I'm going to bother running this report, so let's pretend this statistic is SharePoint disk storage, and we didn't scan in a couple days here, but let's just pretend it continues. And then the ... is showing me that 6 months from now we're going to be up here if things continue the way they are now. And oh my gosh, that means we have to buy more disk or SAN or whatever it happens to be. And you're able to sort of see that future based on historical performance. So that concept of GSX trend reporting, where I can either look at it here or generate fixed reports. Right now you can only send them out as an attached file, like a PDF file or a CSV file. In 10.2, they'll be deposited at an FTP site, so if you want to keep network traffic down, why send the same report to 65 people, right? Let's send them a link to that report, so that will be added in the near-term future as well. And again, you can select the stats you want. And then finally, and we're going to get into Q&A, there's this tab called Environmental Health. The concept of environmental health is based pretty much idle statistical analysis methodologies. And the idea here, and in this example, we're looking at a SharePoint profile where we're looking at SharePoint availability. We've previously established which statistics we want to look at. And the ones with the yellowish tan bars are what we've said is our SLA statistic. You get to decide which stat is the SLA you are managing to. And ones with the green bars that you see down here are KPIs that and again, you decide which statistics. We've got all these statistics we looked at a minute ago. This is a dashboard type that we're creating where you can look based on the lens you created before, a way to look at all your servers at once. So we've decided that there are 3 or 4, in this case 5 different, 6 different KPIs that we like to see at the same time. And then I can also establish other extraneous data that may not be literally related to the SLA, but I like to look at that. So here I'm seeing that I've got 4 SharePoint servers. One's doing great. Other ones are experiencing significant performance negative for performance for our users. The line is the contract value. Here we're above contract. So that's good, but we're below contract on the other 3 servers, and my average is obviously very far below. So if I wanted to, I don't worry about this server too much, but I want to look at why are these guys bad, and maybe the KPIs are giving me some indications. So I've got RAM utilization is really high, and the server average response time here and accessibility is very, very high as well, which high is bad for an access time. That's why it's red, and you can determine when these graphs go from red to yellow to green, either in high good or higher being bad. You determine all that based on what is the nature of the statistic. So here I'm seeing that these couple servers are doing really bad in access time and RAM, and that's what we're probably going to go look at first. I mean, I'm kind of oversimplifying here, but the idea is that we can drill down and look at this. And I can even double-click and look at specific statistics. Okay, I don't actually have any of my demo data here, but the idea is that you can not only build down the original view, but we can drill down deeper and deeper and deeper into additional statistics. You build that once, and then as your performance is going on over time, we can drill down and manage the outliers. So the concept here is we would not waste any time on this server because it's doing well. We would go after these other guys that have impacts and the users are being affected. We've got 8 or 7 minutes or 7 or 8 minutes here for Q&A. Carl, you ready to give me some questions, or maybe you can jump in and answer some of these as well?
Yep, a few questions here. The first one that came in was, what is the difference between your product and Scom with the SharePoint Management Pack?
Okay, well, that's a good question. First of all, to us, most Microsoft shops probably are running Scom, and we understand that. So this is not really perceived as a alternative to Scom. I would see this as a augmentation of what you can do with Scom, and to get into the details of the individual platforms that you care about. So obviously with Microsoft, it would be Exchange or SharePoint. So the differences are, and I would go back to the beginning of the presentation where we talked about agentless, which is a huge difference between, or a huge advantage, I guess, in the way we approach things. If you have agents, you're going to impact performance, and it is also a lot more complicated to install and tune because you have to install and tune it on every single target server and resource that you want to monitor. So I believe that monitoring is good, and so easy monitoring is even better. So the concept of being agentless so that you can get it up and running and also not impact the very resources you're monitoring by your function is very important. Agentless is external observation of how things are behaving, and agent-rich, if you will, tools are looking at yourself, and it's hard to diagnose yourself from the perspective of what other people are seeing because your viewpoint is jaundiced by your own function. That's the same idea with IT resources. If the server can't work properly, then therefore it can't diagnose itself to tell you something's wrong, and then of course obviously alert you to. The other big advantage, or the big thing where we think we really add value, is in understanding the user perspective. So again, to get on the server itself, you really can't understand what resources look like from the outside when you're on the inside. You have no intervening network connection, and the same resources are saying, hey, I responded instantly. When in reality, if you looked at it from the outside, perhaps that response time is not really acceptable to the end user population, and that's why they're screaming and freaking out, because they're out there in the real world. And that's what we're really trying to do, is to understand the user's experience from out there where they are. If I answered adequately, there's a lot more nuances to it than that, but I think right now that's a pretty good summary. Carl, let's start up another one.
All right, next question is how does the tool work with virtualized servers?
Well, you're monitoring, first of all, let's start with where you can install GSX Monitor. I keep talking about a GSX Monitor workstation, and that's probably not semantically exactly accurate. And you can actually run it on a workstation class machine. What you guys have been looking at here when we ran GSX Monitor, that's been running on my laptop. But in a production environment, you would probably not do that. I mean, you can set it up to run as a service, and you got a workstation, you can stick it on your credenza, but 2 in the morning, no one's responsible to make sure that darn thing's turned on. So you're probably going to want to put it in a server room, and it's a really good candidate to run on a VM slice, because it's not going to use that much capacity of a typical server. So first of all, we can run on a VM slice, so that's the first thing I guess I want to mention. If fully virtualized, GSX Monitor is connecting to those resources really in no different way than your users do. So if those resources are moving around, we're actually looking at the consumption of the resources. To us, it does not matter if it's virtual or a fixed piece of hardware. It's really irrelevant. Carol, if you can get any of these, great. Otherwise, just let's serve up another one. Hopefully I answered that adequately for whoever asked it.
That sounded good, Steve. All right, I've got another one. Does the monitoring tool affect SharePoint server performance?
Well, anything affects performance in some way. So the only answer I can give you that is 100% accurate is yes. But I don't think that is really significant, however. Think this way. GSX Monitor, we've been saying all along through this last 40 minutes or so, that it is look at the user perspective, and it behaves like a user. So if you have 5,000 SharePoint users in your environment, you now have 5,001. And the impact of GSX Monitor on SharePoint's performance is very much like another user, admittedly probably busier than the average human, but it is another user nonetheless. Got time for a couple more, Carl.
Here, Steve. Aside from BlackBerry, does the monitoring tool support other smartphones?
Okay, well, BlackBerry is utilizing currently, prior to the Mobile Fusion era of BlackBerry, which is, I'm guessing, out soon. I've been hearing, I think, end of March, so soon is very soon. BlackBerry currently monitors their own smartphone devices, and we monitor BlackBerry for many years now, including HA. I had mentioned earlier in the IBM world, if you're utilizing Traveler, which is another active sync technology, you can monitor Android and iOS. Well, I'm saying we're not really monitoring the devices; we're monitoring the users attached to those devices. So, in a way, yes, we are. So to now, it is Traveler and BlackBerry, and of course we'll continue to keep current with what BlackBerry releases, so you'll be able to do that later. We're not here to talk about Exchange too much, but in one of the connection methodologies to your CAS servers is active sync. So in our current version now, if you are in an Exchange environment, one of our methodologies that we test and the protocols that we test to connect to the CAS is active sync. So I would say that would be the start of broader monitoring for mobile devices, because that is a key piece of that function. However, we're not monitoring it at the same level we do BlackBerry. It's very robust what we do there. So we are currently looking in our roadmap to add good as another platform that we monitor, and we're constantly moving forward in our roadmap rather to do that. So today, I guess I've bounced around a lot in my answer, but if you have specific questions, I would reach out to me, and we'll answer what you need. We're up here at 11:45. Carl, let's push one more in here, and then
next question: is it possible to monitor different servers at different locations?
I'm sorry, Carl. I was still talking, so I didn't catch the beginning of that question. Can you do it again?
Is it possible to monitor different servers at different locations with a single monitor station?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it would be absolutely abnormal to not have that situation. Even in a reasonably small organization, you may have multiple offices around whatever country you exist in, or all over the world potentially. And absolutely, it's not an issue. It's all about credentialing and being established so that we can connect. It's just like a user is it possible that one of your users could connect servers in multiple locations? Certainly. Maybe the average person doesn't, but certainly the administrators probably do. So the thing is that the GSX Monitor installation has the appropriate credentials. It absolutely can and normally would, and you would want that because you'd be wanting to have the whole idea of GSX Monitor is that we have one clearinghouse of all the information where I'm seeing all of my servers regardless of where they are, and I know what their condition is because I'm responsible for them. So yes, the answer is an unequivocal yes. Well, we were talking over each other, Carl. Maybe folks didn't hear. I was saying that there's a lot of. I'm assuming, Carl, you haven't told me if there's a bunch of questions we didn't get to. I kind of assume normally that there are. We'll have one of our team follow up with you if we never got to your question to get into it. And thank you all for your time. Sorry for going so fast. Again, if you have questions and you're intrigued by what you see here, I would suggest you reach out to myself or Carl or one of the sales team in your country, and you can set up a one-on-one demo like this, but you can get to the things that matter to you rather than a general overview. And also you can download the trial version and fire it up and try it in the real world too. So thanks, everybody. And I don't know if you had anything to wrap up, Carl.
Yeah, just to expand on the trial version, we had another question come in asking about that. If you go to our site, you can download the trial version. I think right now it's a 60-day trial, and you can use up to 15 servers. Again, that's available on our site. I'd like to thank you, everybody, for joining us today for the webinar. There's a short survey afterwards. If you guys could take a couple minutes to fill that out, we appreciate it. And hopefully we'll talk to everyone soon. Take care.